Okay, so today we will be starting with Python. So if you are in 11 or 12, you must be familiar with Python, and if not, we will be covering the basics really quickly. So I will be covering these three topics and the first four topics, and the rest of the topics will be covered by Gaurav. So let me. Okay, so let's first discuss why we need to learn Python. So Python is one of the most widely used languages. So like JavaScript is also popular, but then Python is more popular because it is widely used. So uh, yeah. So for example, it can be used in web development in the backend, and then we can use it in artificial intelligence and machine learning. It also helps in Android development, and like the possibilities are endless. You can do almost anything with Python, and it's a high level language. It's a dynamic language because of which it is slower than languages like uh, C++ and Java, but then it's more like English. So we will see it just in a moment. So if you are using Windows, you need to install Python. Python is pre-installed in Linux. So for example, I'm using Linux. So if I do Python 3 minus version, so I have Python 3.9.7. If you are using Windows, you need to install it. For now, what you can do is you can use online compilers, online Python interpreters like Replit, or there is another one, online GDP. Replit, I prefer Replit because of its UI, but I guess it requires login and sign up. So you can go with just a second. Yeah. So you can go with online GDP as well. So yeah. So once you have Python installed, so I have installed Python on my PC. Just okay, never mind. So uh, now, so for when we were starting JavaScript, we need to install some extension to get recommendations, right? So similarly for Python, we need to install a few extensions. First is the Python extension by Microsoft. And I guess when you install Python, then it will auto recommend to install uh, Violence extension that is also from Microsoft. Both of them just help you in writing code and giving you auto completion recommendation. So, okay, if you go to online GDB, you first need to choose Python 3, and then you can start writing code whatever you want. Yeah, here you will get the output. Now, to start with, let's first go over the basics. Python is more like English. So, and yeah, there is one more thing. Just a second. Just ignore this virtual env and .vs code folders. So, Python is an interpreted language. So, what it means is that if you have coded in, let's say, C++, then what happens is that, let's say, this is a simple program to print hello world, and then I do something like this, hello world. Now I have not closed this double quotation marks intentionally. So what you will see is that So to run a Python program, what you need to do is you need to write Python or Python 3. Python will also work. Python and then the file's name, so main.py. You will see that. Okay, let me do something like this. Uh, Name is equal to your name. Will this work? No. Okay, I don't know why this happens, but for example, I do something like for. Okay, so what it means is that let's say you have an error, you run into an error on, let's say, line 10. So if you code in Python, in C++, let's say you miss a semicolon on line 10 in C++. So while you compile the program, it will not run. While compiling itself, it will give an error. But what happens in Python is that, now this is, I guess, the updated version of Python, but what happens is in interpreted language is that it reads the line, reads the code line by line. So first it will read line 1, then 2, then 3, and that's how it works. So, and JavaScript is kind of hybrid. How it works is really complex. So JavaScript is a mix of interpreted and compiled language. So there's a lot which goes behind the scene in JavaScript. But for Python, it's purely interpreted language. So let's start with a simple program to write hello world. So print is a function. So if you need to print anything, let's say this is a print function. Through this, what happens is that you can print anything. So I can print true. True is Boolean, as you know from in JavaScript. True was with small t, but in Python we have capital T. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, you may run into an error. So as I write print true, so it just prints that thing. So if I write hello world, now inside this print function, we can pass several arguments like hello world. Now, what are arguments? We will talk about them when we will do functions, but I guess you should have an idea because we covered functions in JavaScript. So like just treat it as like console.log. It's same. It does the same work. So print hello world. So what happens is that when we give comma, it prints both of them. Okay. Sorry, I'm not able to read chat because I'm using two different devices. So if you have any doubt, just unmute and ask it. So whenever you write two different arguments, what Python does is that it so there is something called separator argument. So by default, it's a space. So what this means is that each argument will be separated with a white space. So I can define it as 2 stars. So what will happen is that hello 2 stars, which is the separate, which I've defined it as the separator. By default, it's white space. So hello world. And then if I print this twice, so you can see that it is automatically going to the next line. And why this is happening is because we have end parameter, which is by default \n, which is new line. But we can change that as well if we pass it as empty string. So as you can see now, both of them are coming in the same line. And there is another thing. If we just run the print function, so and we don't pass any argument, then what it will do is that it will just print an empty line, just a line break, that is \n. So here we defined it as blank space, but you can see because of this print statement, it is being printed on the next line. So that is the print function. Next is, let's start with variables. So oh, there's someone in the waiting room. Admit it. Okay, so to start with variables, let's say I write name. So name will be a string. So what how we define is that we write the variable name and equals to, and then whatever the value we need to assign to it. Now we do not do something like string, or we need not define int age equals to whatever. We need not do that. We just need to write age and then whatever number we want to write. Okay, so and variables in Python are dynamic. So what it means is that here I'm defining name. So let's say in C++ you define string name is equal to Shivansh, and then you can't do name is equal to uh, a some number. So it will in C++ it will give an error, but in Python you can change the data type of any variable. So here it's name equal to Shivansh. Now let's talk about data types. So the first one we have is string. So this is a string. Now you can define a string using double quotation marks or single quotation marks. Both will work. And then we have integers. So in integers we have uh, simple integers. Then we have float. So let's say this is an integer and this is float value. So you get the point. And we also have something like complex numbers, which we need not do right now, because like you will only need complex if you are doing some scientific or mathematical calculation, but in general use we never use complex. And then okay, let's see. And then we have string. Then we have iterables, like we have tuple. Now there are few reserved keywords like tuple. Oh, tuple is a reserved keyword, so VS Code will tell itself that you can't use tuple because it's highlighting it in a green color. So tuple, so I've added an underscore. So tuple is equal to, now we define a tuple. What is a tuple? So in JavaScript we had arrays, right? So similarly, let me start with list. So list is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. So list is just like array. It's pretty much the same as array. And what the good thing is that we need not define the, like in C++, we need to define the size of an array, but here it's completely dynamic. We can append. So append is a function with the help of which, like if you know a little bit advanced C++, so like in vectors, if we deal with C++ vectors, we had pushback. Similarly, we have append function, which adds whatever element we need to add in the list at the last index. So if I write lst.append 5 and then if I print lst, what it will do is that it will add 5 at the end of the list. And in Python as well, the index is something like it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So it starts with 0 and it goes on like that. Now selecting individual elements in a list. So if we do 0, it will choose 1. Now there is one thing in Python that we can have negative index as well, which is kind of unique, because in what -1 means is that I want the last element. So minus in when we do give a positive value, it starts from the left side. So 0, 1, 2, 3. If I give it as 1, it will output this 2 value. But if we give it as -1, it will start from the right hand side and give the last value, which will be, okay, let me comment this out. So which will be 4, but and in this case it will be 5 because 5 will be added to the list. So here we get 5. Now important thing to keep in mind in Python is that, let's say I'm doing something like if. Now, if statement, Gaurav will be covering that up, so I will not be explaining that in detail. And I mean, if you want, I can, but let's just keep it. Okay, so in JavaScript, what we used to do was we had something like this. So we had these curly braces which defined the scope of a function, that is what is to be done within within the if statement. So if this condition is true, if num is equal to 14, then do this. But in Python, we don't have curly braces, so there should be a way to tell Python that what is within that scope. So what we do is we have indentation. So by default, we have a tab space as indentation. So let me explain that. So if I do print num is 14, or else print num is not 14. So what happens is that, okay, now in Python, these parentheses are also optional. So if you don't want, it's optional. So most of the time you don't want to add those parentheses. So it's just, you can just write the condition and before that the if keyword. So if number is equal, okay, so this is equals to, not equal to. So if number is equal to 14, print number is 14. So what we are telling is that by indentation, we are telling that this is one. Uh, so inside this, if I have nested if, so how the indentation goes is that if name is equal to Shivansh, so print something. Okay. So inside of this, when I'm defining another scope, so I again need to give that indentation. So make sure to keep this indentation. So if you are defining it as a single space, so keep that consistent. Keep it as single space. But by convention, it's a tab space. So that is what is recommended. Uh, yeah. So for example, if I add a white space here, okay, because of formatting. Okay, so if I do something like this, I added a white space here, it will give an error. It will say that indentation error, unexpected indent. So because of this white space, it is thinking that there must be some scope, like it should be inside some kind of a scope, but it doesn't find one, because of which it is giving indentation error. So we need to keep in mind that the indentation should be uniform. So that is it. Now if statement will be conditional constructs. Gaurav will cover that. But so these are now, these are lists. So I hope you get the point. Acha, any doubt so far? Like anything? I hope class 11 students will not have. But if anyone has any doubt, they can go ahead. Acha, then I take it as no. So to continue, so I hope you get this part of list. Now, similarly, let's say I have uh, names and names of, let's say, names of names of the class teachers of class 11. So let's say we have class teacher A, class teacher B, and class teacher C. Now these class teacher will not change. So let's say by mistake, I do something like names of, the first name will change to D. So I can do that. let me comment this out. As also, how to in comments in Python. So we add a comment by using this hashtag symbol, and then we can write whatever comment we want. Write a comment, and if you want to write multi-line comments, then we use triple, yeah, something like this. So triple quotation marks. It can be single quotation mark or double quotation mark. So I can write a comment, multi-line comments like this, and I can do the same with uh, yeah. So this is how we write multi-line comment, and these are single line comments. Now, so these are the, let's say these are also the naming convention. So let's say I want to name it class teacher. So in JavaScript, what we used to do was something like this. We use camel case, but in Python, like it's not compulsory, but it's a convention to use an underscore to separate variable name, different words in a variable. So this is class teacher is equal to ABC. Now, class teacher is not something we will change. We don't want to change that in a program, right? So if I use a list, I can reassign the value, but I'm sure that I don't want to reassign any of the values. So for that, I can use tuple. And when I use tuple, it gives me this error, type error, tuple object does not support item assignment. So tuple is immutable. So you can't change LE value of a tuple. You can, so that is a tuple. Now there is another iterable that is, okay. So let me see what all I have covered. Range, yeah, range. So we have something called range data type, and we will use this in while running for loops. So if I do something like print range of 1 to 10, so what this means is that okay, if I run it like this, it will print range 1 to 10, which doesn't make any sense. But uh, what I can do is that I can convert it to list, and now you can understand what it does. So it returns now range actually returns this value, but it's in the range data type. So if we want to see individual elements, we need to convert it to list or a tuple. So what it does is that this is the starting value. So I want the range function to return countings from 1, starting from 1 until 10. So the upper range is not included. So you can see it goes up till 9. So it is same as doing for I equals 0, sorry, I equals 1. Like I'm writing the code in JavaScript here, just so that you can understand. I equals 1, I is less than 10. So keep in mind that this is less than 10, not less than equal to, and I plus plus. So this is what you will write in JavaScript to get something like this. So Python makes it easier. Using the range function, we can create a list like this. And what we can do is that, so this is less than 10. So we can change this value. So the first is from where we need to start. This is the value which up till which it will go, and this I plus plus. So this is the step value, and we can define it as, let's say, if I do it as 10, and if I make this 100. So now you can see that it's going 1, then now it will be something like plus equal to 10. Okay, so this is the step value. So the first time it is 1, then 11, then 21, and 31, and so on. So I can start it from 0 to make things look more logical. So 0, 10, 20, 30. Now if I want to make it go till 100, so I will do like this common sense that it should be 101 to include 100. Now, if what if I want to do it in reverse? So what I will do is that, let's say I want to print 10, 9, 8, 7 till 1. So let's do it in JavaScript first. So it will be I equal to 10. I should be less than, so it will be something like I should be less than, or yeah. So here we will write it as 10. Then here will be -1, and here will be -1 again. So what we are doing is that I is equal to 0, and this -1, what it means is that it should be, no, it's not I made a mistake. Yeah, so it's something like this. I will be equal to 10. This is the step value, and it will go until it doesn't reach this value. It doesn't become either less than that or more than that. Okay, so it is 10. The step value is minus plus equal to -1, so which is -1. So it will it will decrease, and then what will happen is that it will go until, let's say, if you draw a number line, so if this value is on the right hand side, until it reaches this number or it changes the side. So if it goes to the left hand side of that number, then it will stop it and it will return whatever list it has. So I hope it makes sense. I just complicated stuff up. So it will go like, if I do something like -5, for example, so it will go to 10, then it will reduce it by 5, so it will return 5, and then -5 will be 0, and then it will check if the value is -5. So till here, it was on the right hand side of -1, but -5 is on the left hand side of the -1, so it will stop right here, and this 1050 will is the list which we will get. So that is the range data type. Range data type by default, like if we do something like this, we can't get it, but we can change it to list or tuple to get the values. Then we have dictionary. Yeah. So dict again is a reserved keyword. So dictionary is more like object in JavaScript. So what we can do is that, let's say it's like key value pair. So if I have something like name and I have Shivansh, then I can have class 11, and then maybe knows coding, and then just to show that we can store any data type, and inside of or dictionary, okay, and maybe like favorite number, something like this. I don't know why I'm making this, and 1 2 3 4, whatever number it may be. So just to show that here we can have string. So we can have anything as key value as a key. So here I have a string, we can have number as well. So, and as the value, we can have a string, we can have a number, we can have a boolean, we can have list, we can even have a dictionary as the value. So it will be nested dictionary. And how it works is that if I print dictionary, the whole dictionary, it will print it out like this. But let's say I want the name. Uh, so it will print out Shivansh. So it will first locate this, and it will get the value of string Shivansh. So for the key name, the value Shivansh. So it will return that. And yeah, so it's basically like that. So this is dictionary, and the next thing is set. We will not cover frozen set because it's not that common. For set, So I just want to tell that it's not in our school syllabus, so don't try using it in school exams until that she once told us. Because I tried it and ma'am said that we can't use it. So, but anyways, acha, there is one more thing. If I do something like this and print type of set, so set is basically, let's say if I do something like set of a list and the set, so you can see that uh, it starts with a curly brace, just like dictionary. So if you want to declare an empty set, so you might think that we can do it simply like set is equal to this, but you can see that it's taking it as a dictionary, even though we want it as a set. So the easiest way to tackle this is by using a set function. So it returns an empty set, and now if we do it, it's a set. Okay. Now what set does is that in maths, I guess all of you must be knowing what set is, but just to recap, set is equal to set of mm, 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So it just prints out the unique elements. So since one was repeated more than once, so only one of the occurrence was taken into consideration. So, and also to get a data type of any variable, you can just use this type function and pass in the variable. And like here, we got class as set. So that is set. And then we have Boolean. So Boolean is basically true or false. These are the two values. And binary types, you don't need to get into that because we are basically doing this for backend for Django, and we will not be requiring that. So these are the basic data types. Set also, yeah, it helps in like you must, if you are in 11 or 12, you must be getting stuff like print out all the unique elements from a list. So we can simply do it using the set function, but set is not in our syllabus, so we need to do it logically. But anyway, so that is set. And now now there is one important thing which is really confusing if you are a beginner. So so let's say I have LST is equal to 1, 2, 3, and LST2 is equal to LST. So you are thinking that uh, okay, I'm making a copy of LST, and if you try to change, let's say, the first element of LST2 and make it -1, and now if you print LST2 and LST, both of them, so what you will see is that you change the value of LST2, but when LST is printed, the first element of LST was 1, but even the first element of LST also changed to -1. And why this is happening is because the way Python is made. So what happens is that when you define this LST variable, it what it does is that it creates a memory location. Or let me show that there is some. Okay, so just a second. Let me annotate and show it to you. So if you have something like what happens is that when you do LST is equal to 1, 2, 3, it takes this list and stores this in a memory location. Let's call that ABC. This is the memory location. And when you and this LST variable, you can understand it as a box, and what it does is that it points to this memory location, which is ABC. So it stores the address of that memory location. And when you do LST2 is equal to LST, then what happens is that this is LST2 variable, and it also points to the same memory location, which is ABC. So they both are pointing to the same memory location. And when you are changing the value of the first element of LST2, since they both are, since it is pointing to the memory location ABC, it will change 1 to -1. And when we are trying to print LST, so since this is also pointing to the same memory location, and since we changed this, it is printed as the first element of LST is also printed as -1. So how can we fix this? So one way is, so this is called as shallow copying a variable. And if we want to make a true copy, we can do something like this. So now, let me do one more thing. ID function returns the memory location of that specific. Yeah, so you can see that memory location of both of these variables are same. But if I do something like this and now print it, you can see that these are different. This ends with 400 and this ends with 168. So this is the difference. And now if I try to do LSD2 of -1 is equal to 0, this is LSD. And now if I print this, you can see that this is changed to 0. LSD2 of -1 is changed to 0, but LSD remains 3. So that is how we create true copy. Something else left. Loops in Python, and then we have conditions. Okay, so there are two kinds of loop in Python. First is a for loop, and the other one is while loop. We do not have do while loop in Python, so but that doesn't make much of a difference because most of the time we use for loop. So let's say I want to print a sequence from 1 to 10. So I will define number variable as 1, and while num. So we can, if you are coming from C++ or Java background or JavaScript, so you will definitely, I also used to add this parenthesis, but as you will slowly code in Python, you will get into a habit of not using them. And then when you code in C++ or JavaScript, then it will be a problem because you will tend to miss this. But anyways, so it's less than, let's say, 11. Now, we used to do something like this, but in Python, as I said, we define the scope using indentation. So Python is doing it for me, VS Code is doing it for me, but let's say if I was using Vim or what Notepad, then I have to enter tab. So now make sure that, let's say I do something like print num, and then on the next line, it should be the same tab. So this should be consistent. Now print num. Now you can't do something like num plus plus. This is one thing which I don't like about Python. You can't do num plus plus. You need to write, either you write num equal to num plus 1, or you can use the shorthand num plus equal to 1, which means num equal to num plus 1, just like JavaScript. So similarly, you have num by equal to 1, into equal to 1, minus equal to 1. So you get the point. So num plus equal to 1, and this should print from 1 to num, while num is less than 11. So this is printing from 1 to 10. If I want this in the same line, I can define end is equal to a white space, and that will print all of them in a single line. Now, if we want to do it using for loop, so in for loop, what we do is for I in range. So as I explained you the range function, so this is the starting value, this is the ending value, and by default it is 1. So you may write it, you may not write it. So I'm skipping it. By default it's 1, so it doesn't matter if you write it or not. And then you just need to write print num. So since the step value was sorry, print I. So since by default the value the step value is 1, you need not do something like I plus equal to 1, because every time let me do one thing. Python file. Okay, so you can see that for now the value of I is 1. It will print it now. It is printed here. Now the next time it enters the loop, since the step value is 1, you can see the value of I is changed to 2, and this way it goes on. So you can now there is another way. So let me do something. So there is another way you can print all of it in one line. So this is actually a one line code in Python. Dot join. I'm not sure if this will work. Range is also a table, so it should work. So let me do something like this. Now it should work. Okay, got it. So I have to do something like this. Of x for x. Wait a second. There is some problem with brackets. This is the one. I missed one of them. Okay. So it should work now. Yeah, so this is actually one line of code. Now this is the join function. Now what join function does is that basically if you, oh my god, what did I open? Okay, so what join function does is that, let's say you have a list of strings, let's say A, B, C, E, F, G, H, I, J, and something like this. So what it will do is join function just joins it. So it will concatenate these strings, but the separator will be \n. So you get the point. So the reason why it was not working if I simply converted it to this was because it the elements need to be strings. So I used something known as list comprehension. Now it's what it is telling is that s. Now if you don't get this, don't get intimidated, because okay, it might be the first day you are learning Python, which is completely okay. This is I will not say advanced stuff, but a little bit complicated. So as you will understand the follow. So what this, let me explain this first. So when I wrote this, so you got this when I printed the range, you got that what range returns is basically an iterable with values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So what this meant was that for I in range, so it will iterate through this. So 1, 2. So the first thing which happens is that first this range function evaluates. You can understand it this way. I don't know what happens behind the scenes in the compiler in the interpreter, but how you can understand it is that you can understand that first the range functions return this list. It's not the list, it's range data type, but just for simplicity, this is what the range function returns. And then the I, first the value is of I is 1, then it goes to the next value, then the next value, then the next value, then the next value. Now, so now this is how the range function actually works. So this is how the for loop actually works. So it iterates through the iterable range. So range actually returns some kind of a list, and then we print I. Similarly, what we can do is we can iterate through a string. So let's say the string is uh, alphabets is equal to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Okay, and I can iterate through this as well. So what will happen is that it will now string is an iterable. If I pass something like, okay, I can pass this directly here. I need not define it as a variable for I in this string. So what it will do is that first I will take the value of the first alphabet, then the second alphabet, then the third alphabet, and first letter. Sorry, what am I saying? First letter, then the second letter, then the third letter, and it will go on like that until it reaches the end of the string. Now we can pass in anything, any iterable here, but if I try to uh, pass something like a boolean, which is not an iterable, so it returns this error that as I was talking about interpreter, what it did was that it executed line 53 and 54, it printed till 10, and then it gave this error that boolean object is not iterable. If we were doing this in C++, as soon as I would hit that compile button, it should have given me that error. But since Python is an interpreted language, so it goes line by line. So now it gave me the error that boolean object is not iterable, and the same thing will happen if I pass in an integer. So you can pass a string, you can pass a tuple, you can pass a list, you can pass a dictionary, any iterable. Okay. So yeah, that is so whenever you need to run a for loop, just use the range function and it will print from 1 to 9. So and I need not go over it, but just for formality, where is the while loop? Yeah. So this while loop, just to explain it, I hope it was understood, but then also this while loop will go. Sorry, let me remove this and enter this. This while loop will go until this condition is true. So what we are doing is we are printing this number and then we are incrementing it by 1. So the first time it is 1, then it's becoming 2, and when the value of num becomes 11, oh sorry 10, then it increments itself by 1, so it becomes 11, and this condition becomes false and it exits the while loop. So that is how the while loop works. So yeah, any doubts so far? Okay, so I'm taking that as a no. So I guess I covered all the topics. Loops, we did loops, and the conditional construct. Gaurav said that he will be doing that, and it's already an hour. long session. So let's end till here. I will try to give you some practice question on Python. Acha, by the way, how many of you are in class 11? Can you just raise the hand? Okay, so those who are not in class 11, I hope you understood, because class 11 will definitely understand the basic stuff. Okay, so this is it for today. Okay, so whatever. Now, so this is it for today. Gaurav was not able to join this session, so what he will do is that he will record the remaining part of the session, and he will merge both of the videos and upload it on the YouTube, so you can see the other part of the session on the YouTube, which will be uploaded in 2 to 3 days. Okay, so let me stop the recording.